The phone's notification chime cut through the quiet hospital room like a blade. Victoria Hartwell shifted against her pillow, wincing as the surgical incision pulled at her abdomen. 3 days post-surgery, and every movement still felt like fire. Victoria, you need to see this right now. Sarah's voice trembled through the phone speaker, a tone Victoria had never heard from her best friend in 20 years. I'm sending you screenshots. Your husband? Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Rain pelted against the hospital windows with increasing intensity, matching the sudden racing of Victoria's heart. The heart monitor beside her bed responded with faster beeping, drawing a concerned glance from the nurse passing in the hallway. Sarah, what are you talking about? Victoria's voice came out as a rasp, still affected by the anesthesia and pain medication. She fumbled for her phone with trembling fingers, the device feeling heavier than usual. Check your messages. Now. Sarah's breathing was audible through the speaker. I wouldn't be telling you this if I wasn't absolutely certain. Victoria's phone buzzed. One message, then another, then a flood of screenshots that made her blood run cold. The first image showed her millionaire ex-husband's phone screen, displaying a text conversation with someone named Amanda Pierce. Victoria recognized the name immediately. Richard's new marketing director, a 28-year-old who had joined Hartwell Technologies 6 months ago. Can't wait to have you all to myself while she's recovering. Read Richard's message, sent just yesterday. Victoria will be bedridden for weeks. We finally have our chance. Amanda's response made Victoria's stomach lurch. Your house is so much nicer than my apartment. Can't believe she built all this and doesn't even appreciate what she has. Victoria's hands began to shake as she scrolled through more messages. Photos of Amanda wearing Victoria's jewelry. Amanda in Victoria's kitchen, cooking breakfast in Victoria's silk robe. Amanda lounging by Victoria's pool, posting selfies with captions about living my best life. How? Victoria whispered into the phone, her voice barely audible over the rain. Amanda's roommate works at the coffee shop near our office, Sarah explained, her words coming in a rush. She saw Amanda showing off these texts to her friends yesterday. Said Amanda was bragging about landing a billionaire and how stupid his wife was for not seeing it coming. The roommate recognized you from the photos Amanda was showing around. Victoria's vision blurred, but not from the medication. 20 years of marriage. 20 years of building Richard's company from a startup in their garage to a billion-dollar technology empire. She had been the one writing business plans at 3 in the morning while he pitched to investors. She had been the one managing finances when they could barely afford rent. She had been the one who suggested hiring more women in leadership positions, which is exactly how Amanda Pierce had entered their lives. The heart monitor's beeping accelerated further as Victoria processed the betrayal. During her most vulnerable moment, recovering from surgery that Richard had insisted she needed immediately, he was moving his young colleague into their home. Victoria, talk to me. Honey. Sarah's voice pulled her back to the present. I need to see more, Victoria said, her voice gaining strength despite the tremor. Everything you have. Are you sure some of these are pretty explicit? Show me. The next screenshots revealed the depth of Richard's deception. Messages about Victoria's surgery being convenient timing. Photos of Amanda trying on Victoria's clothes with commentary about how she obviously doesn't wear half this stuff anyway. Most crushing of all, Richard's message from this morning. Victoria still thinks I'm in back-to-back meetings. She has no idea I've been coming home every night. Victoria's free hand clutched the hospital bedsheet as she absorbed the timeline. While she had been telling nurses how wonderful her husband was for visiting every day and bringing her flowers, he had been bringing Amanda Pierce into their bedroom every night. There's more, Sarah said quietly. Voice messages. Play them. Richard's familiar baritone filled the hospital room, but the words were foreign to the man Victoria thought she knew. Amanda, the coast is clear. Victoria will be out for weeks. We can finally have our time together. Pack a bag and stay the whole week. She'll never know. Amanda's response was filled with giggles that made Victoria's skin crawl. This is so exciting. I've never been with a billionaire before. Should I order groceries? I want to cook for you every night like a real girlfriend would. Victoria's throat constricted as she listened to her husband laugh at Amanda's words. You're already more of a wife to me than Victoria ever was. She's so focused on business, she forgot how to be a woman. The phone slipped from Victoria's hands and slid across the bedside table, coming to rest against a vase of roses Richard had brought yesterday. The same roses he had probably bought after spending the morning in bed with Amanda Pierce. Victoria, are you still there? Sarah's voice sounded distant now. Victoria stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the small holes in each square, as she had done countless times over the past 3 days. Except now, instead of using the exercise to manage post-surgical pain, she was using it to prevent herself from screaming. The nurse appeared in the doorway, drawn by the persistent beeping of the heart monitor. Mrs. Hartwell, is everything all right? Your heart rate is quite elevated. I'm fine, Victoria managed, though she was anything but fine. Just a bad dream. The nurse adjusted some settings on the machine and checked Victoria's IV. Would you like me to call your husband? He left specific instructions to contact him if you needed anything. A bitter laugh escaped Victoria's lips. No, don't call him. He's in meetings all day. After the nurse left, Victoria retrieved her phone and spoke to Sarah again. How many people know about this? Just me and Amanda's roommate so far. But honey, people are starting to talk. Amanda hasn't been subtle about her sudden lifestyle upgrade. Victoria closed her eyes and let the reality sink in. Her perfect life, her 20-year marriage to her millionaire ex-husband, her position as the respected wife of a successful CEO. All of it had been built on a foundation that was crumbling while she lay helpless in a hospital bed. But as the initial shock began to fade, something else emerged. Something harder and colder than the pain medication coursing through her veins. Victoria Hartwell had not built a financial empire by crumbling at the first sign of adversity. She had not survived 2 decades in the ruthless technology industry by accepting defeat gracefully. And she certainly had not spent 20 years as the power behind Richard's throne to watch some ambitious 28-year-old destroy everything she had worked for. Sarah, she said, her voice steady for the first time since answering the phone. I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to find out everything you can about Amanda Pierce, employment history, financial records, social media presence, everything. And I need you to document every single message, every photo, every piece of evidence of this affair. Victoria, what are you planning? Victoria looked out the rain-streaked window at the city below, the same city where she had built her life and her husband's fortune. I'm planning to remind Richard Hartwell exactly who he's dealing with. The heart monitor settled into a steady rhythm as Victoria's resolve crystallized. Richard thought he was married to a naive woman who would quietly accept betrayal. He was about to discover he had been married to a warrior who had simply been waiting for the right battle. Tomorrow, she would be discharged from the hospital. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. 3 days earlier, the ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the glitter of jewelry worn by San Francisco's most influential philanthropists. Victoria Hartwell stood at the podium, her emerald silk gown perfectly tailored to her 52-year-old figure, addressing a crowd that collectively controlled billions in charitable giving. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're not just raising money for children's literacy programs, Victoria said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had spent decades in boardrooms. We're investing in the foundation of our society's future, and I'm proud to announce that my husband, Richard Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Technologies, has committed to matching every donation made tonight, dollar for dollar. Applause filled the ballroom as Richard joined her on stage, his commanding presence immediately drawing attention. At 55, he still cut an impressive figure in his custom tuxedo, his silver hair adding distinguished authority to his deep blue eyes. My wife understates our commitment, Richard said, taking the microphone with the ease of someone accustomed to public speaking. Let me be clear. Hartwell Technologies believes that education is the greatest equalizer in our society. Tonight, we're doubling your impact. Victoria beamed with pride as she watched her husband work the crowd. This was what they did best together, combining her strategic planning with his charismatic leadership to create something greater than either could achieve alone. The charity auction she had organized would raise over $50 million for literacy programs across California. As the evening progressed, Victoria circulated through the crowd, her financial background allowing her to speak knowledgeably with donors about tax advantages and long-term giving strategies. She had learned early in their marriage that being Richard's wife required more than looking beautiful at events. It required being a true partner in building their empire. "Mrs. Hartwell, you've outdone yourself," said Margaret Chen, president of the Pacific Foundation. "This auction format you designed is revolutionary. We should discuss implementing it for other causes." "I'd love to explore that," Victoria replied, mentally noting another potential business opportunity. She had always been the strategic mind behind Richard's public success, though she preferred to let him take center stage. From across the room, Victoria spotted Amanda Pierce laughing with a group of young professionals near the bar. The new marketing director looked stunning in a red dress that Victoria suspected cost more than Amanda's monthly salary, and she was holding court with an animated story that had everyone hanging on her words. "She's quite something, isn't she?" said David Morrison, Hartwell Technologies' chief financial officer, following Victoria's gaze. "Richard says she's brought fresh energy to our marketing campaigns." "She certainly knows how to make an impression," Victoria observed, watching as Amanda threw her head back in laughter, her blonde hair catching the light. There was something almost performative about the young woman's movements, as if she was constantly aware of being watched. Richard appeared at Victoria's side, placing his hand on the small of her back in a gesture that once would have made her heart flutter. "The auction just reached $47 million, he announced. "Your planning made this possible." Victoria turned to smile at her husband, but noticed his eyes drift toward Amanda's group. It lasted only a second, but Victoria's business instincts had been honed by years of reading people's subtle tells during negotiations. "Richard, are you listening?" Victoria asked. "Of course," he replied, but his attention snapped back to her with a slightly guilty expression of someone caught wool-gathering. "I was just thinking about the logistics of distributing these funds efficiently." Victoria chose to believe him, as she had chosen to believe many small inconsistencies over recent months. Richard working late more frequently, phone calls he took privately in his study, credit card charges she didn't recognize when reviewing their monthly statements. The auction continued with Victoria serving as the unofficial coordinator, ensuring smooth transitions between lots and keeping energy high among bidders. She watched Richard work the room, noting how he seemed particularly animated when speaking with younger female donors and board members. "Ladies and gentlemen, our final lot this evening," the auctioneer announced. "A week at the Hartwell family estate in Napa Valley, including private wine tastings and access to the most exclusive vineyards in the region." Victoria had suggested donating their vacation home for the week, knowing it would generate significant bidding. As the price climbed toward $200,000, she felt the satisfaction of a plan executed perfectly. Sold to Mrs. Patricia Hamilton for $250,000. The auctioneer's gavel fell to thunderous applause. The evening concluded with Victoria accepting congratulations from dozens of attendees who praised both her organizational skills and the event's remarkable success. As she and Richard rode home in their car, she felt the deep satisfaction of work well done. $53 million, Richard said, loosening his tie. "You orchestrated something incredible tonight. Victoria." "We make a good team," she replied, settling back in the leather seat. Though I noticed Amanda seemed to be enjoying herself. She was quite popular with the younger crowd. "Amanda's networking abilities are exactly why I hired her," Richard said. "She understands how to connect with demographics we've struggled to reach." Victoria nodded, though something in his tone felt rehearsed, as if he had prepared this response for a question he anticipated. "She certainly has confidence." "Confidence is exactly what our marketing department needed," Richard continued. "She's brought innovative approaches to our campaigns. In fact, I'm considering expanding her role." The conversation felt strangely formal for a married couple discussing a colleague, but Victoria dismissed her unease. Richard had always been focused on business, even during private moments. It was one of the traits that had made him successful, and, if she was honest, one of the things that sometimes made their marriage feel more like a partnership than a romance. When they arrived home, their 4,000 square foot house in Pacific Heights seemed particularly quiet. Victoria kicked off her heels in the foyer, her feet aching from hours of networking in designer shoes. "I'm going to check emails before bed," Richard announced, heading toward his study. "At midnight?" Victoria asked, though she wasn't entirely surprised. Richard's work ethic had always been intense. "Just need to follow up on some connections from tonight while they're fresh," he explained without turning around. Victoria climbed the stairs alone, as she had countless nights before. In their bedroom, she carefully hung her gown and removed her jewelry, catching her reflection in the mirror. 52 years old, but she maintained her figure through yoga and regular exercise. Her auburn hair showed only the slightest silver threading, and her green eyes still held the intelligence that had first attracted Richard 23 years ago. Yet as she prepared for bed, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was shifting in her perfectly constructed life. The charity auction had been a tremendous success, but success in her marriage felt increasingly elusive. From downstairs, she could hear Richard's voice drifting up from his study, a phone conversation conducted in hushed tones that suggested business wasn't the only thing keeping him awake. Victoria settled into bed with her tablet, reviewing news about the evening's event that was already appearing on social media. Photo after photo showed her and Richard looking like the perfect power couple, their success evident in every carefully composed shot. What the cameras hadn't captured was the growing distance between them, the conversations that felt increasingly professional rather than personal, or the way Richard's eyes seemed to be constantly searching for something or someone just beyond her peripheral vision. As she drifted toward sleep, Victoria's last conscious thought was a question that would prove prophetic: when had their partnership become more important than their marriage? And what would happen when even the partnership began to crumble 3 floors below? Richard's voice continued murmuring into the night, discussing strategies and opportunities that Victoria wasn't part of planning for the first time in 20 years. The pre-surgery consultation room at Pacific Medical Center smelled of disinfectant and anxiety. Victoria sat on the examination table in her hospital gown, listening to Dr. Martinez explain the hysterectomy procedure for the 3rd time while Richard scrolled through emails on his phone. "The fibroid tumors have grown significantly since your last ultrasound," Dr. Martinez said, his calm voice delivering information Victoria already knew by heart. "Given their size and location, surgical removal is definitely the best option. The recovery period will be approximately 6 weeks, with the first 2 weeks requiring complete bed rest." 6 weeks, Victoria repeated, the reality settling in. As someone who rarely took sick days, the idea of being incapacitated felt overwhelming. "I'll arrange for the best private nursing care," Richard said, finally looking up from his phone. "Whatever you need to recover comfortably." Victoria appreciated the gesture, though she noticed he had made the decision without consulting her preferences. "I might prefer having Sarah help during the day. She knows my routines." "Nursing professionals would be more qualified," Richard countered. "Let me handle the arrangements." Dr. Martinez continued with post-operative instructions, but Victoria found herself studying her husband's face rather than listening. Richard's jaw was tense, and he kept glancing at his phone even though he had silenced the notifications. His wedding ring caught the fluorescent light as he fidgeted with the device. "Do you have any questions about the procedure, Mrs. Hartwell?" Dr. Martinez asked. "How long before I can return to normal activities? I have several board meetings scheduled for next month." "Nothing strenuous for 6 weeks minimum," the doctor emphasized. "Your body needs time to heal completely." Richard's phone buzzed with a call. He glanced at the screen, and Victoria caught a flash of something that looked almost like excitement before he declined the call. "Important client?" she asked. "Marketing department emergency," he replied quickly. I'll handle it after we're finished here. The nurse, Kelly, entered with pre-surgery paperwork, and her warm southern accent immediately put Victoria at ease. How are we feeling today? Sugar, I know surgery can be nerve-wracking, but Dr. Martinez is one of the best. I'm ready to get this over with, Victoria admitted. I've been dealing with these symptoms for months. Your husband seems very attentive, Kelly observed, watching Richard pace near the window while speaking quietly into his phone. Victoria followed the nurse's gaze. Richard was indeed attentive, but something felt performative about his concern, as if he was playing the role of devoted husband rather than actually being one. The pre-surgery preparation moved quickly. Victoria changed into surgical scrubs, removed her jewelry, and submitted to the routine of blood pressure checks and IV insertion. Richard held her hand during the process, but his touch felt distracted. I'll be right here when you wake up, he promised as they wheeled her toward the operating room. Everything will be fine. Victoria squeezed his hand, choosing to focus on his words rather than the fact that he had checked his phone twice during the 30-second conversation. As the anesthesia mask descended over her face, Victoria's last conscious thought was gratitude for Richard's presence. Whatever small distance had grown between them lately, surgery had a way of clarifying what really mattered. The anesthesia took hold, and Victoria drifted into darkness, completely trusting that her husband would be waiting when she returned. 4 hours later, Victoria's consciousness returned slowly, accompanied by the steady beeping of machines and the antiseptic smell that meant she was still in the hospital. Her throat felt raw from the breathing tube, and her abdomen ached with the deep, pulling sensation of surgical incisions. There's our sleeping beauty, came Nurse Kelly's voice from somewhere to her left. How are you feeling? Sugar. Thirsty, Victoria croaked, her voice barely recognizable. That's completely normal. Let me get you some ice chips. Kelly bustled around the bed, checking monitors and adjusting IV bags. Your surgery went perfectly. Dr. Martinez said everything looked exactly as expected. Victoria tried to focus on the room around her. Private suite, afternoon sunlight streaming through large windows, comfortable chairs for visitors. Where's Richard? Oh, honey, he stepped out about an hour ago. Said he had an urgent business call that couldn't wait. Left specific instructions for us to call him the moment you woke up. The words stung more than Victoria expected. She had assumed Richard would be sitting beside her bed when she woke up, holding her hand and reassuring her that everything had gone well. Instead, he had prioritized business over her first moments of consciousness after major surgery. Should I call him now? Kelly asked, reaching for the phone. Not yet, Victoria said, surprised by her own response. Let me get oriented first. Kelly brought ice chips and helped Victoria adjust to a more comfortable position. The pain medication created a floating sensation that made everything feel slightly unreal, but Victoria's mind was sharp enough to register disappointment. Has anyone else called or visited? Victoria asked. Your friend Sarah stopped by during surgery. Sweet lady. She left flowers and said she'd be back tomorrow morning. Kelly gestured toward a beautiful arrangement of white roses and lilies on the windowsill. Victoria felt a rush of affection for Sarah, who had taken time from her own busy schedule to show support during surgery, while Victoria's husband conducted business calls in the hallway. When Richard finally returned 2 hours later, he carried coffee and wore the slightly frazzled expression of someone who had been managing multiple crises. Victoria, thank God you're awake, he said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. I'm so sorry I wasn't here. Amanda needed immediate guidance on the Morrison account presentation, and I couldn't reach David to handle it. Amanda, Victoria asked, though the name was becoming increasingly familiar in Richard's explanations for his absences. Our marketing director. Remember, we met her at the charity auction last week. She's presenting to one of our biggest potential clients tomorrow, and she needed strategic input on the proposal. Victoria nodded, though something about the explanation felt unnecessarily detailed. In 20 years of marriage, Richard had never provided such thorough justification for business calls. How do you feel? Richard asked, settling into the visitor's chair, but keeping his phone visible on his lap. Sore, tired, ready to go home, Victoria studied her husband's face, noting that his attention seemed divided even during this conversation. The doctor says you'll be discharged tomorrow afternoon if everything looks good. I've already arranged for round-the-clock nursing care. I told you, I'd prefer Sarah during the day. She can handle anything I need. Richard's expression tightened slightly. Professional care would be more appropriate for your recovery needs. Victoria was too exhausted to argue, but she filed away Richard's insistence on professional nursing rather than help from her best friend. It seemed designed to limit her contact with people who knew her well during her most vulnerable period. I should let you rest, Richard said, standing up as his phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen, and Victoria caught another flash of that strange excitement she had noticed earlier. Everything okay? Just Amanda confirming tomorrow's presentation details, he said, but his fingers moved across the phone screen in what looked like more than a simple confirmation. After Richard left, Victoria lay in the gathering darkness, listening to the sounds of the hospital around her. Footsteps in hallways, quiet conversations at the nurse's station, the distant chime of elevators. She tried to convince herself that Richard's behavior was normal stress response to his wife's surgery, combined with genuine business pressures. Amanda Pierce was new to the company and naturally required more guidance than experienced employees. But as Victoria drifted in and out of medicated sleep, her subconscious mind cataloged details that her conscious mind wasn't ready to confront Richard's phone calls during her surgery consultation. His absence during her post-operative awakening, his detailed explanations about Amanda's needs, and his insistence on professional nursing care that would limit Victoria's contact with friends. The foundation of their 20-year marriage had developed cracks that Victoria wasn't yet ready to acknowledge, but the evidence was mounting whether she chose to see it or not. Outside her hospital window, the city lights twinkled like stars, and Victoria fell asleep, trusting that tomorrow would bring clarity and comfort from the man who had promised to love her in sickness and in health. She had no way of knowing that at that very moment, Richard was sitting in his car in the hospital parking garage, sending text messages that would eventually destroy everything she believed about their life together. The morning sun filtered through Victoria's hospital room windows as she attempted to eat breakfast with hands that still trembled slightly from anesthesia. Her phone, which had been charging on the bedside table overnight, suddenly came alive with a notification that would change everything. One new voicemail, Richard, 11:47 p.m. Victoria frowned at the timestamp. Richard had left the hospital around 7 o'clock the previous evening, claiming he needed to review Amanda's presentation materials. Why would he be calling her at nearly midnight? And why hadn't the call woken her up? She pressed play, expecting to hear Richard's voice explaining some detail about her discharge or offering words of encouragement. Instead, she heard her husband's familiar baritone, but the words were foreign to everything she thought she knew about their marriage. Amanda, the coast is clear. Victoria will be out for weeks. We can finally have our time together. Victoria's fork clattered against her breakfast tray. She looked around the room frantically, as if someone else might explain what she was hearing, but she was alone with the devastating revelation playing through her phone speaker. Richard's voice continued, I've been waiting for this opportunity for months. Pack a bag and stay the whole week. She'll never know. The voicemail continued with Amanda's breathless response. This is so exciting. I've never been with a billionaire before. Should I order groceries? I want to cook for you every night like a real girlfriend would. Victoria's hands began shaking so violently that she could barely hold the phone. The heart monitor beside her bed responded to her spiking blood pressure with increasingly rapid beeping. Richard's laughter filled the hospital room. You're already more of a wife to me than Victoria ever was. She's so focused on business, she forgot how to be a woman. The voicemail ended with sounds that Victoria's mind refused to process. Intimate conversation and laughter between her husband and his young colleague discussing their plans for her recovery period. Victoria stared at the phone screen, which displayed the cruel irony of the situation. Richard had meant to hang up after calling Amanda, but had somehow left Victoria connected to their private conversation. Technology had betrayed the betrayer. The hospital room spun around her as 20 years of marriage collapsed into a heap of lies and deception. Every business trip, every late meeting, Every explanation about Amanda's need for guidance, all of it recontextualized by the raw honesty of a conversation Richard never intended her to hear. Nurse Kelly appeared in the doorway, drawn by the persistent beeping of Victoria's monitors. "Mrs. Hartwell, what's wrong? Sugar, you look like you've seen a ghost." Victoria couldn't speak. She could only point at her phone, which Kelly gently took from her trembling hands. "Oh, honey," Kelly said after listening to enough of the voicemail to understand the situation. "I'm so sorry. Do you want me to call someone for you?" "Sarah," Victoria whispered. "Call Sarah Chen. Her number should be in my contacts." Kelly made the call while Victoria focused on breathing exercises she had learned in yoga class, trying to prevent herself from hyperventilating. The betrayal felt physical, a sharp pain in her chest that competed with her surgical recovery for attention. "She's on her way," Kelly reported. "Should be here in 20 minutes. Meanwhile, let me get you something to help with the shock." Victoria shook her head. "I need to think clearly. I need to understand what I just heard." She replayed the voicemail 3 more times, each listen revealing new layers of deception. Amanda referring to Richard as her billionaire. Richard's casual dismissal of their 20-year marriage. The easy familiarity between them that suggested this affair had been developing for months, not days. Most crushing was Richard's assessment that Victoria had forgotten how to be a woman. The woman who had built his company's financial infrastructure while raising his profile in San Francisco society. The woman who had sacrificed her own career ambitions to support his dreams. The woman who was currently recovering from surgery while he moved his girlfriend into their bedroom. Sarah burst through the hospital door 25 minutes later, still in her pajamas under a hastily thrown-on coat. "Victoria, what happened?" Kelly said there was an emergency. Victoria handed over her phone without a word. She watched Sarah's face transform from concern to horror to rage as the voicemail played. "That son of a bitch," Sarah whispered when it ended. "Victoria, I'm so sorry." "How long?" Victoria asked. "How long do you think this has been going on?" Sarah sat on the edge of the hospital bed, choosing her words carefully. "Honey, I've been worried about changes in Richard's behavior for months. The way he talks about Amanda, how often her name comes up in conversation, how he's suddenly an expert on marketing strategies he's never cared about before." Victoria felt her world tilting off its axis. "You knew. I suspected something wasn't right," Sarah clarified. "But I hoped I was wrong. I hoped it was just a midlife crisis or work stress. I never imagined it had gone this far." "He's moving her into our house while I'm recovering from surgery," Victoria said, the words feeling surreal as she spoke them. "They're using my illness as an opportunity to play house." Sarah's jaw tightened with anger Victoria had rarely seen from her usually diplomatic friend. "What do you want to do?" Victoria stared out the hospital window at the city below, the same view that had seemed so peaceful the night before. "I want to know everything. I want to know how long this has been going on, how serious it is, and what Richard is planning." "I can help with that," Sarah said firmly. "But first, you need to take care of yourself. You just had major surgery." "I feel like I'm having another kind of surgery," Victoria replied. "The kind where someone cuts away everything you thought was true about your life." Sarah squeezed Victoria's hand. "We'll get through this together. But honey, you need to be prepared for this to get worse before it gets better." Victoria nodded, though she couldn't imagine how the situation could possibly get worse than discovering her husband's affair through an accidental voicemail while recovering from surgery. She was about to find out. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text message from Richard. "Good morning, sweetheart. Hope you slept well. I'll be in meetings most of the day, but we'll visit this evening. Love you." The casual normalcy of the message, sent just hours after the devastating voicemail, revealed a level of deception that took Victoria's breath away. Richard was living a double life with such ease that he could seamlessly transition between planning an affair and sending loving messages to his wife. "What kind of man does this?" Victoria asked Sarah. "The kind who's been taking you for granted so long, he forgot you're a person with feelings?" Sarah replied, The kind who thinks he's entitled to whatever he wants. Victoria saved the voicemail and forwarded it to her personal email account. If Richard could be calculating, so could she. Sarah, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to find out everything you can about Amanda Pierce, where she lives, what her background is, how she got hired at Hartwell Technologies. Everything. Sarah nodded grimly. I'm on it. As Sarah left to begin her investigation, Victoria lay back against her hospital pillows and contemplated the ruins of her marriage. Richard thought he was married to a naive woman who would quietly accept betrayal while she recovered from surgery. He was about to discover he had been married to a strategist who had been building his empire while he was building his ego. The heart monitor settled into a steady rhythm as Victoria's shock transformed into something harder and more focused. She had spent 20 years ensuring Richard's success. Now she would spend her recovery ensuring his consequences. Sarah returned to Victoria's hospital room at 3 o'clock that afternoon, carrying a laptop bag and wearing the grimly determined expression of someone who had spent 6 hours uncovering unpleasant truths. How much do you want to know? Sarah asked, settling into the visitor's chair and opening her laptop. Everything, Victoria replied, though her stomach clenched with anticipation. I need to understand what I'm dealing with. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard. I started with basic background research on Amanda Pierce, 28 years old, originally from Denver, moved to San Francisco 8 months ago, before Hartwell Technologies. She worked for 3 different marketing firms in 4 years. That's a lot of job changes, Victoria observed. It gets worse. I called my friend Lisa, who works in HR at Zentech, Amanda's previous employer. Apparently, Amanda left under questionable circumstances involving inappropriate relationships with married executives. Victoria's heart sank as the pattern became clear. She has a history of this. According to Lisa, Amanda specifically targets older, successful men in positions of power. She's strategic about it. Sarah pulled up a social media profile. Look at her Instagram from 9 months ago versus now. The transformation was startling. 9 months ago, Amanda's photos showed a young woman in modest clothing, posting about job interviews and apartment hunting. Recent photos revealed designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and restaurants Victoria recognized as Richard's favorite spots. She's documenting her relationship with my husband on social media, Victoria said, the betrayal feeling fresh with each new revelation. It gets worse, Sarah warned, pulling up credit card statements. I accessed your joint account records online. Victoria, Richard has been spending enormous amounts of money on someone who isn't you. The laptop screen displayed a devastating timeline of financial infidelity. Tiffany and Company, $5,000. La Bernardin, $350. The St. Regis Hotel, 2 nights, $1,500 total. Nordstrom, $2,700. A spa in Napa Valley, $800. These dates, Victoria said, studying the statements. This Tiffany purchase was the day I went to Sacramento for the literacy board meeting. The hotel charges were when I was visiting my sister in Portland. He's been systematically using your absences to develop this relationship, Sarah confirmed. And he's financing it with joint funds. Victoria's business mind automatically calculated the totals. $23,000 in 3 months, on someone he claims is just a colleague needing professional guidance. Sarah hesitated before continuing. There's more. I called the office pretending to be a client trying to reach Richard. His assistant said he was in all-day strategy meetings with Miss Pierce and couldn't be disturbed. Strategy meetings? Victoria repeated bitterly. That's what we're calling affairs now. The assistant also mentioned that Richard and Amanda have been working late together several nights this week, reviewing presentation materials for the Morrison account. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. The Morrison account was finalized 2 months ago. I should know. I designed the financial projections myself. The evidence continued mounting as Sarah shared her investigation findings. Amanda's LinkedIn profile listed skills and experience that perfectly matched Richard's stated reasons for hiring her, but former colleagues painted a different picture of her actual professional capabilities. She's competent enough to do the job, Sarah explained. But her real talent seems to be manipulating workplace dynamics to her advantage. 3 different people mentioned her ability to charm senior executives while creating drama among female colleagues. Victoria processed this information while watching the late afternoon sun slant through her hospital window. She identified Richard as a target and systematically infiltrated our lives. The timing suggests careful planning, Sarah agreed. She joined the company 6 months ago, right after you and Richard announced the charity auction project that would require him to work closely with marketing. The calculated nature of the seduction felt somehow worse than spontaneous attraction. Amanda Pierce had studied Victoria's marriage like a business opportunity and identified the perfect moment to strike. "There's something else," Sarah said quietly. "I drove past your house this morning." Victoria's blood pressure spiked again. "What did you see?" "Amanda's car in your driveway, and when I parked across the street for a few minutes, I saw her in your kitchen window, wearing what looked like your robe." The image of Amanda Pierce in Victoria's home, wearing Victoria's clothes, making herself comfortable in Victoria's space while Victoria recovered from surgery, triggered a rage so pure it left her temporarily speechless. "She's not just having an affair with my husband," Victoria said when she could speak again. "She's auditioning to be my replacement." Sarah nodded grimly. "It appears that way. And based on the financial records, Richard is funding her audition quite generously." Victoria's phone buzzed with another text from Richard. "Meeting's running late again. Might not make it for visiting hours tonight. Rest well. My love." The casual lie, delivered with endearing language, revealed the depth of Richard's deception. He wasn't in meetings, he was with Amanda, probably at Victoria's house, using Victoria's recovery period to accelerate their relationship. "What do you want to do with this information?" Sarah asked. Victoria looked at the evidence spread across Sarah's laptop screen. Financial records, social media posts, timeline analysis, and witness statements that painted a comprehensive picture of betrayal and manipulation. "I want you to document everything," Victoria said. "Screenshots, printed records, witness contact information. I want a complete file that shows exactly what Richard and Amanda have been doing." Planning for divorce proceedings. Victoria considered the question. 20 years of marriage, dissolved because her husband couldn't resist a young woman who had specifically targeted him for his wealth and status. The humiliation felt overwhelming, but underneath it was something harder and more focused. "I'm planning for war," Victoria replied. "Richard thinks he's dealing with a trusting wife who will quietly accept his midlife crisis. He's about to discover he's dealing with the woman who built his empire and knows exactly how to dismantle it." Sarah smiled for the first time that day. "Now that sounds like the Victoria Hartwell I know." Victoria's phone rang with a call from Dr. Martinez's office, confirming her discharge for the following morning. Tomorrow, she would return to the house where her husband was playing out his fantasy of domestic bliss with his young girlfriend. But Richard and Amanda had made a crucial miscalculation. They thought Victoria was weak and helpless, recovering from surgery with no knowledge of their affair. They were about to face a woman who had spent 20 years learning to win in a ruthless business environment, armed with complete documentation of their betrayal and the motivation that came from having nothing left to lose. Victoria's recovery period was about to become Richard's reckoning period. Victoria's discharge from Pacific Medical Center proceeded with the efficiency of a military operation. Dr. Martinez reviewed her post-surgical care instructions. Nurse Kelly provided detailed recovery guidelines, and the hospital administration processed her paperwork while Sarah waited in the parking garage with the car. "Remember, sugar, no heavy lifting, no strenuous activity, and don't hesitate to call if you experience any unusual symptoms," Kelly said, giving Victoria a warm hug goodbye. "Take care of yourself." Victoria appreciated the genuine concern in Kelly's voice, though she suspected the next few days would test her recovery in ways the medical team hadn't anticipated. The drive home through San Francisco's afternoon traffic gave Victoria time to prepare mentally for confronting the evidence of her husband's betrayal in her own house. Sarah had offered to stay with her, But Victoria needed to process the situation privately before deciding her next moves. "Are you sure you want to go in alone?" Sarah asked as they pulled into the circular driveway of Victoria's Pacific Heights home. "I need to see it myself," Victoria replied, though her hands trembled slightly as she looked at the house where she had lived for 15 years. "If Amanda's belongings are there, I need to document everything. Call me if you need anything," Sarah said. "I'll be monitoring my phone all evening." Victoria used her key to enter through the front door, stepping into the marble foyer that had always felt welcoming, but now seemed like a crime scene. The house was quiet, with late afternoon sunlight streaming through the tall windows, casting long shadows across familiar furniture. Everything looked normal until Victoria climbed the stairs toward the master bedroom. On the nightstand where Victoria kept her reading glasses sat a bottle of expensive perfume she didn't recognize. In the bathroom, foreign skincare products lined the marble counter alongside Victoria's usual items. The shower contained shampoo and conditioner brands Victoria had never purchased. Most devastating was the walk-in closet, where Victoria discovered designer clothing in a size 6 hanging alongside her own size 8 garments. Amanda Pierce hadn't just moved into Victoria's house. She had moved into Victoria's life with the presumption of permanence. Victoria documented everything with her phone camera, creating a comprehensive record of Amanda's colonization of her personal space. Each photo felt like evidence in a trial she hadn't yet decided to conduct. The bedroom itself showed signs of recent occupancy by 2 people. The bed was made, but carelessly, with pillows arranged differently than Victoria's usual style. On Richard's nightstand sat a coffee mug Victoria didn't recognize, and a book about marketing strategies she was certain Richard had never shown interest in before. Victoria sat on the edge of her own bed, surrounded by evidence of Amanda's presence, and called the one person who could provide answers about the legal implications of what she was discovering. "Peterson, Miller and Associates. This is James Peterson," came the gravelly voice of the attorney who had handled Victoria and Richard's business contracts for over a decade. "James, it's Victoria Hartwell. I need to discuss a personal legal matter, and I need absolute confidentiality." "Of course, Victoria. What's going on?" Victoria explained the situation in the clinical terms she had learned to use in business presentations, focusing on facts rather than emotions. James listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification on timing and documentation. "Victoria, I'm sorry you're dealing with this," James said when she finished. "Based on what you've described, you have grounds for divorce proceedings with significant financial implications for Richard." "What do you mean your prenuptial agreement includes adultery clauses that become relevant here? Additionally, your contribution to building Hartwell Technologies gives you substantial claims on company assets. If Richard is using joint funds to finance an extramarital relationship, that constitutes financial misconduct." Victoria felt a spark of hope for the first time since discovering the affair. "What would you recommend? Document everything: financial records, evidence of the affair, proof of his using marital assets for the relationship. Then we discuss whether you want to pursue reconciliation or dissolution." "James, there's something else. I still have access to all company financial accounts. Richard never changed the passwords after I stepped back from day-to-day operations." James paused. "That's interesting. Legally, you're still authorized to access those accounts as a company officer and Richard's spouse. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Richard may have been misusing company resources as well as personal funds. If he's been charging personal expenses to business accounts, that could impact his position at the company." "That would be a serious corporate governance issue," James agreed. "Victoria, you built the financial infrastructure for that company. You know better than anyone how to trace questionable expenditures." After ending the call with James, Victoria sat in her violated bedroom and considered her options. She could confront Richard directly about the affair. She could file for divorce quietly and accept whatever settlement their prenuptial agreement provided. Or she could use her unique position as both betrayed wife and company insider to ensure Richard faced consequences for his choices. Victoria's phone rang with a call from Richard. "Hi, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" His voice carried the casual affection of someone without a care in the world. "I'm home," Victoria replied, resting comfortably. "Wonderful. I'm tied up in meetings until late tonight, but I should be home by 11. Did the nursing service I arranged show up?" Victoria looked around the bedroom filled with Amanda's belongings. "I decided I preferred privacy during my recovery. I sent them away." "Victoria, I really think professional care would be better for your healing process." "I'm managing fine on my own," she lied, recognizing his insistence on nursing care as another attempt to limit her independence during his affair. "If you're sure, I love you, and I'll see you tonight." Victoria hung up the phone and immediately called Sarah. "How bad is it?" Sarah asked without preamble. "Worse than we thought. She's moved in completely. There are clothes, personal items, skincare products. She's not just visiting, she's living here." "What do you want to do?" Victoria stood up from the bed and walked to the window overlooking her garden, where she had spent countless hours planning charity events and business strategies that had elevated Richard's career. "I want to set a trap," Victoria said. "Richard thinks I'm a naive wife recovering from surgery with no knowledge of his affair. I want him to come home tonight and discover exactly who he's been married to for 20 years. "Victoria, are you sure you're ready for that confrontation? You just got out of the hospital." "Sarah, I built a $1 billion company while Richard was learning to give presentations. I survived 2 decades in the technology industry when women were still fighting for basic respect. I'm not going to be destroyed by a cheating husband and his opportunistic girlfriend." Victoria's voice carried a steel that Sarah hadn't heard since their college days, when Victoria had talked her way into advanced finance courses despite lacking prerequisites. "What do you need me to do? Bring wine, good wine, and be prepared to stay late. Tonight. Richard Hartwell is going to learn the difference between the woman he married and the woman he created through 20 years of taking me for granted." Victoria ended the call and began preparing for the most important presentation of her life, the one where she would demonstrate to her millionaire ex-husband exactly what he was losing and exactly what it was going to cost him. Victoria spent the next 3 hours transforming her home into a stage for confrontation. Despite the post-surgical discomfort, she moved through each room with methodical precision, preparing evidence and setting the scene for Richard's return. In the study that Richard considered his private domain, Victoria accessed the company financial systems she had designed years earlier. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory, navigating through accounts and transactions that told a story of systematic financial misconduct. The business credit card statements revealed the extent of Richard's misappropriation. The expensive jewelry, romantic dinners, and luxury hotel stays had all been charged to Hartwell Technologies accounts under vague business expense categories. "Strategic marketing consultation," Victoria read aloud, noting a $5,000 charge at Tiffany and Company. "Client relationship development," she continued, documenting the romantic dinner receipts. "Professional development seminar," she concluded, examining hotel charges for weekends when Victoria had been traveling for board meetings. Richard had been using company funds to finance his affair while claiming tax deductions for personal expenses. The financial irregularities constituted both marital betrayal and corporate embezzlement. Victoria compiled the evidence into comprehensive folders, both digital and printed. 20 years of building financial systems had taught her the importance of documentation that would withstand legal scrutiny. Sarah arrived at 7 o'clock carrying 2 bottles of expensive Napa Valley Cabernet and wearing the determined expression of someone prepared for battle. "How are you holding up?" Sarah asked, noting Victoria's pale complexion and the careful way she moved to protect her surgical incisions. "I'm running on anger and adrenaline," Victoria admitted. "Probably not the healthiest combination 3 days post-surgery, but it's what I have to work with." Sarah surveyed the dining room, where Victoria had arranged printed financial statements, photographs of Amanda's belongings in the bedroom, and copies of text messages in neat stacks. "This looks like a war room." "Because it is," Victoria replied. "Richard thinks he's coming home to his recovering wife who trusts him completely. Instead, he's walking into a presentation about his choices and their consequences." Victoria had changed from her hospital discharge clothes into a tailored black dress that conveyed both authority and mourning for their marriage. She had applied makeup to mask her post-surgical pallor and styled her hair with the same attention she gave to important business meetings. "You look formidable," Sarah observed. "I want Richard to see the woman he's losing, not the patient he's been deceiving." At 8:30, Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Meeting's running later than expected. Probably won't be home until midnight. Don't wait up." Victoria showed the message to Sarah. "He's with Amanda, probably at a restaurant I'll find on tomorrow's credit card statement. Are you going to confront him tonight or wait until tomorrow?" Victoria considered the question while sipping wine that dulled the edge of her physical pain but sharpened her emotional clarity. "Tonight, I want him to walk into this house thinking everything is normal and discover that his secret life isn't secret anymore." At 9 o'clock, Victoria called Richard. "Hi, sweetheart," he answered, background noise suggesting he was indeed at a restaurant. "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you." "Richard, I need you to come home tonight. There's something important we need to discuss." "Can it wait until tomorrow? I'm in the middle of crucial strategy discussions with the marketing team." "No, it can't wait. And Richard, bring Amanda with you. I'd like to meet the woman who's been so instrumental in our company's recent marketing success." Silence stretched across the phone connection. Victoria could hear Richard's breathing change as he processed the implications of her request. "Victoria, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the woman whose clothes are hanging in my closet and whose skincare products are on my bathroom counter. The woman you've been charging romantic dinners to company expense accounts? The woman you've been with while I recovered from surgery?" More silence, followed by Richard's voice pitched higher than usual. "Victoria, you're not thinking clearly. The medication from your surgery is probably affecting your judgment." "My judgment is perfectly clear. Come home. Richard, both of you. We have a lot to discuss." Victoria ended the call and turned to Sarah. "Game time." The next hour passed with agonizing slowness as Victoria and Sarah waited in the living room, surrounded by evidence of Richard's betrayal. Victoria's surgical pain competed with emotional devastation for her attention, but she remained focused on the confrontation ahead. At 10:45, headlights swept across the living room windows as Richard's car pulled into the driveway. Victoria heard two car doors slam and the sound of hushed, urgent conversation on the front porch. "Last chance to change your mind about this," Sarah said quietly. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," Victoria replied. The sound of Richard's key in the front door lock seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet house. Victoria stood up slowly, mindful of her surgical limitations, but determined to face her husband from a position of strength. Richard entered first, his face showing the strain of someone who had spent an hour trying to construct explanations for the unexplainable. Behind him came Amanda Pierce, looking younger and more uncertain than Victoria had expected. "Victoria," Richard began, his voice carrying forced cheerfulness. "You look wonderful, much better than when I saw you in the hospital." Victoria studied her husband's face, noting the guilt poorly hidden behind his attempt at normalcy. "Thank you. I feel much clearer about many things." Amanda hung back near the doorway, her usual confidence replaced by obvious discomfort. She was beautiful in the way that 28-year-old women were beautiful, effortlessly, unconsciously, without the strategic maintenance required of women over 50. "Please, both of you, sit down," Victoria said, gesturing toward the living room where she had arranged the evening's revelations. "We have so much to discuss." Richard moved toward his usual chair, but Amanda remained near the exit, her survival instincts apparently warning her about the trap she had walked into. "Actually," Victoria continued, her voice carrying the authority she had developed through decades of business negotiations. "Amanda, please don't leave. After all, you've been such an important part of our household lately. I think it's time we got properly acquainted." The battle lines were drawn. Richard's secret life was about to collide with Victoria's strategic mind, and the consequences would reshape all their futures. Victoria moved to the dining room table where she had arranged the evening's evidence with the same meticulous attention she had once given to board presentations. Sarah positioned herself near the kitchen, close enough to provide support, but far enough away to allow the confrontation to unfold naturally. "Richard, Amanda, please join me," Victoria said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who controlled the situation, despite appearing vulnerable in her post-surgical state. Richard approached the table warily, his eyes scanning the organized documents and photographs. Amanda followed reluctantly, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor with nervous energy. "Victoria, what is all this?" Richard asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "This is 20 years of marriage," Victoria replied, placing her hand on the stack of financial statements. "And this is 3 months of betrayal." She gestured toward the evidence of Richard's affair. Amanda remained standing near the table's edge, ready to flee if necessary. "Mrs. Hartwell, I think there's been some misunderstanding." Victoria turned her attention to the young woman who had been sleeping in her bed. "Please, call me Victoria. After all, you've been living in my house, wearing my jewelry, and fucking my husband. We're well past formalities." The crude language, delivered in Victoria's refined accent, had the impact of a slap. Amanda's face flushed red, while Richard's jaw tightened with anger. "Victoria, there's no need for this kind of hostility," Richard said. "We can discuss this situation like civilized adults." "Civilized adults," Victoria repeated. "Like the civilized adult who moved his girlfriend into our bedroom while his wife recovered from surgery, or the civilized adult who used company funds to purchase jewelry for his mistress?" Victoria opened the first folder and spread financial documents across the table. Tiffany and Company, $5,000, charged to Hartwell Technologies' marketing budget. La Bernardin, $350, listed as a client dinner on the same night I was in Sacramento for the literacy board meeting. Richard's face paled as he recognized the detailed financial analysis. "Victoria, you don't understand the context of these expenses?" "Oh, I understand perfectly. I designed these accounting systems. Remember, I know exactly how to trace every transaction and identify patterns of financial misconduct." Victoria turned to Amanda, who was staring at the evidence with growing alarm. "Amanda, did you know that Richard has been using company credit cards to pay for your gifts and romantic dinners that makes you an accessory to corporate embezzlement?" "I didn't know," Amanda stammered. "Richard said those were legitimate business expenses." "Interesting," Victoria mused. "So Richard told you that a $5,000 tennis bracelet was a business expense. What kind of business were you conducting?" "Exactly." Richard stepped forward, his voice rising with desperation. "Victoria, you're twisting innocent business activities into something sinister. Amanda is a valuable employee, and I was investing in her professional development." "Professional development," Victoria repeated, opening another folder. "Is that what we're calling it?" She produced printouts of text messages and voicemails, including the devastating accidental recording that had first revealed the affair. "Should I play Richard's voicemail, where he tells you the coast is clear because I'll be bedridden for weeks? Or would you prefer to read the text where you discuss wearing my jewelry and cooking in my kitchen?" Amanda's composure cracked completely. "Richard, you said she never looked at those accounts. You said she wouldn't notice." "Amanda, please don't say anything else," Richard warned, but the damage was done. Victoria smiled coldly. "So you knew about the financial irregularities. You knew Richard was stealing from his own company to fund your relationship." "I never thought of it as stealing," Amanda protested. "Richard is the CEO. He can spend company money however he wants." "Actually, he can't," Victoria corrected. "Hartwell Technologies is a publicly traded company with fiduciary responsibilities to shareholders. Misappropriating corporate funds for personal use is a felony." Richard ran his hands through his hair, his usual commanding presence reduced to desperate damage control. "Victoria, let's discuss this privately. Amanda doesn't need to be involved in our marital issues." "Our marital issues?" Victoria's voice carried 20 years of suppressed resentment. "Richard, Our marital issues began the moment you decided a 28-year-old was more appealing than the woman who built your empire. Victoria stood up slowly, mindful of her surgical limitations, but determined to maintain her authority. But our business issues are what's going to destroy you, because I have documentation of every misappropriated expense, every fraudulent business charge, and every piece of evidence that shows you've been embezzling company funds. Amanda looked between Victoria and Richard with growing panic. What does that mean for me? It means you're complicit in corporate fraud, Victoria explained matter-of-factly. It means your employment at Hartwell Technologies is terminated immediately, and it means you should probably consult with a criminal defense attorney. You can't fire me, Amanda protested. Richard is my boss. Victoria smiled with genuine pleasure for the first time all evening. Amanda, let me explain something about corporate structure. While Richard is the CEO, I own 49% of Hartwell Technologies stock, and as of this afternoon, I've transferred my shares to a trust that votes independently of Richard's interests. Richard's face went white. Victoria, what have you done? I've protected my investment, Victoria replied. The same investment I've been building for 20 years while you've been taking credit for my work. Victoria opened the final folder, revealing legal documents that would reshape their entire future. Richard, you're no longer the majority shareholder of the company we built together. The board of directors will be very interested in these financial irregularities, and I suspect they'll want new leadership. The magnitude of Victoria's strategic planning became clear as Richard processed the implications. She hadn't just discovered his affair, she had systematically dismantled his power structure while he was distracted by his young girlfriend. You can't do this, Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. I already have, Victoria replied. The papers were filed this afternoon. Your lawyer should receive official notification tomorrow morning. Amanda looked around the room as if searching for an escape route from a nightmare that was escalating beyond her comprehension. I think I should leave. That's probably wise, Victoria agreed. But Amanda, before you go, I want you to understand something about the man you've been sleeping with. Victoria's voice carried the cold fury of a woman who had spent decades perfecting the art of strategic destruction. Richard doesn't love you. He loves the idea of you, young, impressed by his wealth, grateful for his attention. But when the novelty wears off, he'll replace you just as easily as he tried to replace me. Amanda's face crumpled as the truth of Victoria's words sank in. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door without another word. Richard started to follow her, but Victoria's voice stopped him. Let her go. Richard, you and I aren't finished. The sound of Amanda's car speeding away marked the end of the affair and the beginning of Richard's reckoning with the woman he had underestimated for 20 years. The house fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer as Amanda's taillights disappeared into the San Francisco night. Richard stood frozen near the dining room table, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal and the wreckage of his carefully constructed double life. Victoria remained seated, conserving her energy for the conversation that would determine the terms of their future. Sarah quietly refilled Victoria's wine glass and retreated to the kitchen, providing privacy while remaining close enough to intervene if necessary. Victoria, Richard began, his voice stripped of its usual commanding authority. I know how this looks, but you have to understand the pressure I've been under. The company demands, the board expectations, the constant stress of maintaining our position in the industry. Victoria studied her husband's face, noting how quickly he had pivoted from denial to rationalization. So your solution to stress was to embezzle company funds to finance an affair with a woman young enough to be our daughter. It wasn't embezzlement, Richard protested, though his voice lacked conviction. Those were legitimate business expenses related to employee development and client relations. Victoria opened her laptop and turned the screen toward Richard. This spreadsheet shows every charge you made to company accounts for personal expenses over the past 6 months, restaurants where you never conducted business meetings, jewelry stores that don't sell corporate gifts, hotels where no business conferences were held. Richard leaned forward to examine the data, his face showing recognition of Victoria's analytical thoroughness. She had always been the detail-oriented partner in their relationship, the one who caught mistakes and identified patterns others missed. The total is $47,000, Victoria continued, charged to various Hartwell Technologies accounts, categorized as business expenses and claimed as tax deductions. That's fraud. Richard, multiple felonies. Good. The board doesn't need to know about this, Richard said, desperation creeping into his voice. We can handle this privately, between us. I'll repay the money, restructure the accounts, make it right. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Richard, the board already knows. I called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. As a major shareholder and company co-founder, I have the right to present concerns about financial irregularities. Richard's composure finally cracked completely. Victoria, you're destroying everything we built together. 20 years of work, gone because of your jealousy over a meaningless affair. Meaningless! Victoria's voice carried 20 years of suppressed anger. You moved her into our bedroom while I recovered from surgery. You used our money to buy her jewelry. You told her she was more of a wife to you than I ever was. Which part of that was meaningless? Richard began pacing, his agitation evident in every gesture. Amanda was a mistake, a midlife crisis, temporary insanity, whatever you want to call it, but destroying the company we built together is permanent. We didn't build it together, Victoria corrected. I built the financial infrastructure while you learned to give presentations. I designed the systems while you schmooze with investors. I handled the details while you took credit for the vision. Victoria stood up slowly, her surgical pain competing with emotional exhaustion, but her resolve remaining absolute. For 20 years, I've been the power behind your throne. Richard, the woman who made your success possible while you convinced yourself you were the genius. That's not true, Richard protested. We were partners in everything. Partners don't lie to each other for months while conducting affairs. Partners don't use joint funds to finance betrayal. Partners don't move their mistresses into the family home while their wives recover from surgery. Victoria moved to the window overlooking the garden, where she had hosted countless business dinners and charity events that had elevated Richard's profile in San Francisco society. I gave you everything. Richard, my career ambitions, my financial expertise, my social connections, my fertility years, everything. Victoria, please. Richard's voice broke slightly. We can work through this. We can go to counseling, rebuild trust, start over. Victoria turned to face the man she had loved for over 2 decades, seeing clearly for the first time who he had become. Richard, do you love me? The question hung in the air as Richard struggled to formulate an answer that might save his marriage and his company. Of course I love you, he finally said, but the words felt rehearsed. Do you love me, or do you love what I can do for you? Victoria pressed. Do you love the woman who builds your financial models and manages your social calendar? Or do you love me? Richard's inability to answer immediately told Victoria everything she needed to know about their marriage. Here's what's going to happen, Victoria said, her voice carrying the finality of someone who had made irrevocable decisions. Tomorrow morning, the board will review evidence of your financial misconduct. They'll likely demand your resignation to avoid criminal prosecution and protect the company's reputation. Victoria, no. You can't do this to us. I'm not doing this to us. Richard, you did this to us the moment you decided Amanda Pierce was worth destroying our marriage for? Victoria returned to the dining room table and gathered the evidence folders with methodical precision. The divorce papers will be filed within the week. Given the adultery documentation and financial misconduct, your legal position is quite weak. What do you want? Richard asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I want the 50% of the company that I earned by building it from nothing. I want the house that I decorated and maintained while you traveled. I want the retirement accounts that I funded while managing our investments. And I want my dignity back. Richard sank into a chair, the weight of his choices finally becoming clear. Victoria, please, we can work something out. Some kind of compromise. Victoria looked at her husband and felt the strange relief that came with clarity after years of confusion. Richard, for 20 years I compromised. I compromised my career for yours. I compromised my independence for our partnership. I compromised my dreams for your success. She paused, letting the words settle between them. I'm done compromising with a man who thinks so little of me that he conducts an affair while I'm recovering from surgery. The grandfather clock chimed midnight as Victoria prepared to deliver the final blow to the marriage that had defined her adult life. Richard, you have a choice. You can resign from Hartwell Technologies voluntarily and accept a reasonable divorce settlement, or you can force me to present the full evidence of your misconduct to the board, the shareholders, and if necessary, the district attorney. Richard's head dropped into his hands as he realized the scope of Victoria's strategic planning. While he had been playing house with Amanda Pierce, Victoria had been building a case that would dismantle everything he had taken for granted. How long have you known, he asked quietly, about Amanda? 4 days. About your total lack of respect for me, much longer than I care to admit. Victoria gathered her folders and turned toward the stairs, ready to end the longest day of her life. Richard, I'll be staying in the guest room while you decide how you want to handle this situation. But understand that my offer of voluntary resignation expires at 9 a.m. tomorrow. As Victoria climbed the stairs, leaving Richard alone with the wreckage of his choices, she felt the strange combination of devastation and liberation that marked the end of one life and the beginning of another. Behind her, Richard sat in the dining room surrounded by evidence of his betrayal, finally understanding that he had lost far more than a marriage. He had lost the only woman who had ever truly believed in his potential and worked tirelessly to make it reality. The emergency board meeting of Hartwell Technologies convened at 9 a.m. sharp in the company's executive conference room. Victoria arrived early, dressed in a navy blue business suit that projected both authority and respectability. She had applied makeup carefully to mask her post-surgical pallor and moved with deliberate precision to minimize any appearance of weakness. James Peterson sat beside her, carrying legal documents that would reshape the company's leadership structure. Across the conference table, the 7 board members reviewed the financial evidence Victoria had compiled, their faces showing a mixture of concern and anger. These expenditures clearly violate our corporate governance policies, said Margaret Foster, the board's senior independent director. Charging personal romantic expenses to business accounts is grounds for immediate termination. David Morrison, the CFO who had worked closely with both Victoria and Richard for over a decade, spoke with obvious reluctance. The pattern of misappropriation is undeniable. Richard used multiple company credit cards to finance what appears to be an extramarital affair. Victoria watched the board members process the evidence with the same analytical approach she had used in building the financial systems they were now examining. There was no satisfaction in destroying Richard's career, only the grim necessity of protecting the company they had built together. At 9:15, Richard entered the conference room accompanied by his own attorney. His face showed the strain of a sleepless night spent confronting the consequences of his choices. Richard, Margaret Foster began, we've reviewed the financial irregularities that Victoria has brought to our attention. Do you have any explanation for these unauthorized expenditures? Richard looked around the table at colleagues who had respected his leadership for nearly 2 decades. I take full responsibility for poor judgment in my personal financial management. I'm prepared to reimburse the company for any questionable expenses. The issue isn't reimbursement, said Thomas Chen, another board member. The issue is fiduciary responsibility and public trust. If shareholders learn that our CEO was embezzling company funds, our stock price will collapse. Victoria watched Richard's face as he realized the board's primary concern wasn't his marriage, but the company's reputation. The practical business implications of his affair were far more damaging than the personal betrayal. What are you proposing? Richard asked quietly. Margaret Foster consulted notes before speaking. The board is prepared to accept your voluntary resignation as CEO, effective immediately. In exchange, we'll structure your departure as early retirement with a limited benefits package and confidentiality agreement. And if I refuse, then we'll terminate you for cause, Report the financial misconduct to authorities and pursue criminal prosecution for embezzlement, Thomas Chen replied matter-of-factly. Victoria felt no triumph as she watched her husband's empire crumble. 20 years of marriage had taught her to measure success by Richard's achievements, and his destruction felt like the demolition of her own life's work. "I'll need time to consider the offer," Richard said. "You have until close of business today," Margaret Foster informed him. "We need to announce new leadership before tomorrow's market opening." The meeting adjourned with Richard leaving alone, while Victoria remained to discuss the transition details. The board members who had once treated her as Richard's supportive wife now addressed her as an equal partner in the company's future. "Victoria, we'd like you to consider returning to an active leadership role," Margaret Foster said after Richard left. "Your financial expertise and institutional knowledge make you invaluable during this transition." Victoria considered the unexpected opportunity. "I appreciate the confidence, but I need time to focus on my personal situation." "Of course, but please know the door's open whenever you're ready." 3 hours later, Victoria returned home to find Richard's car in the driveway and Amanda Pierce's belongings gone from the bedroom. The house felt simultaneously familiar and foreign, like a stage set being dismantled after the final performance. Richard was in his study, packing personal items into boxes with the methodical efficiency of someone who had accepted defeat. He looked up when Victoria entered, his face showing exhaustion and something that might have been relief. "I signed the resignation agreement," he said quietly. "Effective immediately." Victoria nodded, feeling the strange emptiness that followed the completion of a long campaign. "What about Amanda? Terminated this morning. HR handled it as a standard employment separation." Richard's voice carried no emotion as he discussed the end of the affair that had destroyed their marriage. "Where will you go?" "I've rented a condo downtown temporarily until we finalize the divorce settlement and figure out the property division." Victoria looked around the study where Richard had conducted so much of the business that had built their fortune. Awards and photos documenting 20 years of success lined the walls, tangible evidence of what they had accomplished together. "Richard, why?" The question escaped before Victoria could stop herself. "Why was she worth destroying everything we built?" Richard stopped packing and sat heavily in his desk chair. "She made me feel young again, successful, powerful, like the man I thought I was before." "Before what?" "Before I realized that you were the reason for most of my success. Before I understood that without your financial expertise and strategic thinking, I was just another middle-aged CEO with good presentation skills." The admission hung between them, 20 years of truth finally spoken aloud. "Amanda saw me as a billionaire worth pursuing," Richard continued. "You saw me as Richard who needed help with everything from tax planning to social calendar management. I preferred her illusion to your reality." Victoria felt unexpected sympathy for the man who had betrayed her so completely. "Richard, I never tried to diminish you. I was trying to support you. I know that now. But living in your shadow while taking credit for your work created resentment I didn't even realize I was carrying." The conversation felt like an autopsy of their marriage, examining what had died and understanding why. Victoria recognized that their relationship had been built on an unsustainable foundation of her sacrifice and his entitlement. "What happens now?" Richard asked. "Now we divide everything as fairly as possible and try to preserve some dignity in the process," Victoria replied. "I won't pursue criminal charges if you cooperate with the divorce proceedings." Richard nodded gratefully. "Victoria, I want you to know that I do love you. I always have. I just got lost somewhere along the way." "I know," Victoria said. And she did know. Richard loved her the way someone loves a valuable possession, with appreciation for what she provided, but without respect for who she was. That evening, after Richard had moved his belongings to his temporary apartment, Victoria sat alone in the house that had sheltered 20 years of marriage. The silence felt profound after months of tension and deception. Sarah arrived with Thai food and wine, prepared to help Victoria process the day's events. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked as they settled in the living room, where the confrontation had occurred just 24 hours earlier. Empty, Victoria admitted. Like I've been holding my breath for 20 years, and finally exhaled. Any regrets about how you handled things? Victoria considered the question while reviewing the day's accomplishments. Richard's resignation, Amanda's termination, the board's offer of renewed leadership, the beginning of divorce proceedings that would secure her financial future. No regrets about protecting myself, Victoria said finally, but I feel sad about what we lost, or maybe what we never really had. Over the following weeks, Victoria's life settled into a new rhythm of healing, both physically from surgery and emotionally from divorce. The legal proceedings moved smoothly, with Richard's compromised position ensuring Victoria received everything she had requested. James Peterson handled the negotiations with efficiency that bordered on surgical precision. Richard's attorneys know they have no leverage, he explained during one meeting. The financial misconduct evidence makes fighting any of your demands legally impossible. The final divorce settlement awarded Victoria $50 million, half ownership of Hartwell Technologies, the Pacific Heights house, and most of their joint investment portfolio. Richard retained enough assets to maintain his lifestyle, but his days as a billionaire CEO were definitively over. 6 months later, Victoria stood in her new penthouse apartment overlooking San Francisco Bay, watching the sunrise paint the water golden orange. The space felt like a fresh beginning, modern, efficient, designed for a woman who no longer needed to accommodate anyone else's preferences. The morning news played softly in the background, reporting on Hartwell Technologies' successful transition under new leadership. Victoria had accepted the board's offer to serve as chief financial officer, returning to active management of the company she had helped build. The transformation has been remarkable. Margaret Foster had told a technology industry magazine, Victoria Hartwell's return to leadership has strengthened our strategic focus and financial performance beyond all projections. Victoria's phone rang with a call from Sarah, who had become even closer during the months of divorce proceedings and professional transition. Good morning, CFO Hartwell, Sarah said cheerfully. Ready for another day of running the technology world? I'm ready for another day of being myself, Victoria replied, appreciating how accurately Sarah understood her new perspective. Any word from Richard lately? His attorney called yesterday. The divorce will be finalized next week. Victoria felt no particular emotion about the milestone. The marriage had ended months ago in the dining room confrontation. The legal documentation was merely administrative cleanup. How does it feel to be officially single again after 23 years? Victoria considered the question while watching boats navigate the bay below her apartment. Like waking up from a dream I didn't realize I was having. The conversation turned to Victoria's plans for the day. Board meetings, financial reviews, strategic planning sessions that would determine Hartwell Technologies' future direction, work that engaged her intellect and utilized skills she had developed over decades in the industry. After ending the call, Victoria prepared for the day with the same attention to detail she had once devoted to supporting Richard's career. The difference was that now she was building something for herself rather than enabling someone else's success. At Hartwell Technologies, Victoria's presence had transformed the company culture in ways that surprised even longtime employees. The financial systems she designed were more sophisticated, the strategic planning more comprehensive, the decision-making more analytical. She's a completely different leader than Richard, David Morrison had confided to colleagues. More collaborative, more thorough, more focused on sustainable growth rather than dramatic gestures. Victoria's assistant knocked on her office door as she reviewed quarterly projections. Mrs. Hartwell, there's someone here to see you without an appointment. Amanda Pierce. Victoria felt a moment of surprise followed by curiosity. Send her in. Amanda entered Victoria's office looking significantly different than she had 6 months earlier. Gone were the designer clothes and confident demeanor, replaced by a more modest appearance and obvious nervousness. Mrs. Hartwell, thank you for seeing me, Amanda began, standing awkwardly near the door. Please sit down and call me Victoria. Amanda perched on the edge of a chair as if ready to flee at any moment. I wanted to apologize for my role in destroying your marriage. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it. Victoria studied the young woman who had briefly threatened everything she valued. What have you been doing since leaving the company? Working for a small marketing firm in Oakland. Much different from here. But I'm learning to live within my actual means instead of depending on someone else's generosity. The humility in Amanda's voice suggested genuine understanding of the consequences her choices had created. Amanda, what did you hope to accomplish by pursuing Richard? Honestly, I thought I could trade youth and attention for financial security. I thought if I could make him fall in love with me, I'd never have to worry about money again. And now I understand that relationships built on transactions don't provide real security. They provide dependency, which is actually much more frightening. Victoria felt unexpected sympathy for Amanda's naivety. What will you do now? Build my own career instead of trying to attach myself to someone else's success. It's harder, but it's mine. The conversation concluded with Amanda thanking Victoria for her graciousness and Victoria wishing her genuine success in building an independent life. After Amanda left, Victoria reflected on how the encounter had confirmed her own transformation. 6 months earlier, she would have been devastated by facing the woman who had stolen her husband. Now, she felt only mild curiosity about someone whose choices seemed motivated by fears Victoria no longer shared. That evening, Victoria attended a charity gala for children's literacy, the same cause she had supported during her marriage. But now as an individual philanthropist rather than Richard's wife, the event raised $42 million, with Victoria's strategic planning and financial analysis contributing significantly to its success. Victoria, this auction format is revolutionary, said Patricia Hamilton, who had won the Napa Valley Vacation the previous year. You should consider consulting for other charitable organizations. I'll think about it, Victoria replied, already envisioning ways to expand her impact beyond Hartwell Technologies. As the evening concluded, Victoria drove home through San Francisco streets that felt familiar, yet completely different than they had during her marriage. The city hadn't changed, but her relationship to it had transformed completely. In her penthouse apartment, Victoria poured a glass of wine and stood on her balcony overlooking the bay. The lights of the city spread below her like stars, each one representing lives and dreams and struggles she was only beginning to understand from her new perspective. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Saw the news coverage of tonight's gala. You looked radiant, so proud of who you're becoming. Victoria smiled as she typed her response. Still becoming, but finally becoming myself. The message captured the truth of her transformation perfectly. For 20 years, she had been Richard's wife, subordinating her identity to his success and measuring her worth by his achievements. The divorce had forced her to rediscover who Victoria Hartwell was when she wasn't defining herself in relation to someone else. As she prepared for bed, Victoria reflected on the journey that had brought her from a hospital room discovery of betrayal to a penthouse apartment representing independence and success. The path had been painful, but it had led to something she hadn't expected: the discovery that she was far stronger and more capable than she had ever imagined. The woman who had built Richard's financial empire while he took credit was now building her own legacy. The woman who had organized charity events as his supportive wife was now designing strategic philanthropy as an independent force for social change. The woman who had accepted betrayal as the price of marriage was now setting boundaries that protected her dignity and future. Victoria's last conscious thought as she drifted towards sleep was a realization that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. Losing her marriage had allowed her to find herself, and that discovery was worth more than any relationship built on sacrifice and subordination. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities at Hartwell Technologies, new possibilities for philanthropic impact, and new chapters in a life that finally belonged entirely to her. For the first time in 20 years, Victoria Hartwell was exactly where she was supposed to be.